Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
In San Diego and across California, there is a new focus on what used to be known as Cesar Chavez Day. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Chicanos are grappling with recent allegations against the farm workers' rights icon. Our coverage starts with KPBS reporter Katie Hyson. She spoke with two Chicana leaders about how their communities are processing the news.
Earlier this month, multiple women accused Cesar Chavez of child sexual abuse and rape in the New York Times.
That moment was difficult. You know, I think it still is very difficult. Confusing, you know, very confusing, worrisome, concerning. It's just, I don't know, I just feel like without words, right?
For Maria Figueroa, the following week felt like an eternity.
It's very difficult to articulate, you know, because I think many of us are still very much in our emotions, you know, and I point to my heart because it feels conflicted on so many levels.
Figueroa is a professor and a leader in local Chicano and Latino organizations.
Ultimately, we need to question, like, why we uphold particular heroes and icons. And I think we do so because colonialism, you know, and genocide and did a number on us, right? It attempted to erase us.
Figueroa says elevating icons like Chavez was a way to survive that erasure. To say, aquí estamos y no nos vamos. To carve out space for themselves culturally and physically.
I know statues are covered now, or, you know, busts are being, you know, chipped away, and murals are being painted over and or covered, and so very, very swiftly.
She says people are doing what they need to do to respond to the situation. And it's a painful loss for a community that fought so hard to win representation in the first place. The response to the allegations has been swift. Schools and streets are being renamed across the country. California renamed today Farmworkers Day. Chavez's face is rapidly disappearing from public spaces. But Figueroa says the community's processing is slow.
Our culture is very different, you know. I think we just need time for pause and reflection.
She says that pause and reflection is not to disregard the survivors, but to figure out how to hold their stories in a way that honors them, something that will take longer than a week. Monica Hernandez shared a similar sentiment. She's the new executive director of the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center.
Because we take the time to try and think collectively, that's why, you know, it's a slower process. And particularly in this instance, there are going to be long-term wide-range implications for our community, and that's why we feel the need for us to move in a very nuanced kind of way.
White-dominated modern media isn't built for that kind of processing. Reporters call immediately. They need quotes now for a story today.
You know, we're being asked to sit in front of a camera, right, to think out loud things that we are still trying to process internally, right, that are conversations that I haven't even had the time to have with myself, because particularly with communities that go through so many things that, we've experienced so much trauma, we're marginalized, underrepresented. On a day-to-day, we are already existing in a level of like survival mode. And then we have these moments of crisis where we're expected to drop everything to address that. And so it puts us in this really tough place, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually.
And while consequences for Chavez's legacy have been swift, she doesn't see the same consequences for other men.
We have an ongoing problem against violence against women, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity. This is something that continues to happen to women. That we have against someone in power right now that there's multiple allegations against him. Not just him, but many other men in power. Note to this day, there has not been any accountability.
Figueroa noted something else, getting lost in all the conversations and questions about Chavez. The survivors. Instead of focusing on the fall of an icon, she says we should focus on asking, how did this happen? And how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
Statewide, March 31st will be known as Farmworkers Day moving forward. San Diego County also made the switch recently. Luz Delia Caballero visited the fields in Ventura County to hear what this recognition means for workers.
Before the sun rises, they're already here.
It's really difficult to do what they do, and they still do it.
Bent over rows of crops, farm workers move with quiet determination. Hands weathered, backs aching, pushing through long hours, sometimes in unforgiving conditions.
Bending over all day, extreme weather, and too cold in the morning or too hot around the midday.
Jesus Marmolejo with Marmolejo Farms King Produce says the work is demanding.
Well, you have to move, because you have to, try to get as much as you can. So it is very difficult.
Todo es difícil.
Many, like Germán Sánchez Peredo, are immigrants carrying not just the weight of the harvest, but also the weight of responsibility, of sacrifice, of hope for something better.
El cuerpo se desgasta.
They tell us the work is honest, but it takes a toll, essential, but often invisible. That's why this new designation, Farm Workers Day, feels deeply personal.
So how does it feel to have a day where farm workers are recognized? ¿Cómo se siente tener un día donde los agricultores tienen reconocimiento?
Nos sentimos muy contentos.
A recognition, not just of labor, but of humanity.
It was overdue. I've been dreaming about this. We deserve that. We need that respect.
The farm workers' rights movement has always been powered by courage, by people willing to endure, to speak out, to demand dignity in the face of injustice.
In California, half are legal residents and half are non-legal residents that come and go. But all of them have the one thing in common. They want to feed their families.
And while this moment honors that legacy, it also shines a light on what hasn't changed.
We should be fighting for wages.
Marmolejo sits on the board of Friends of Field Workers and says they continue to fight for those working in the fields.
So we're here to help the farm working community with a bunch of programs.
In every field, every row picked by hand, there's pride. Pride in feeding a nation. Pride in work that, despite everything, continues.
The fight is far from over.
Oh, no, it's just beginning.
La lucha sigue.
And our coverage will continue later this newscast. KPBS Imperial County reporter Corey Suzuki visited Brawley. So see how the legacy of Cesar Chavez is changing in a place that considered him a hometown hero.
I'm Ariella Scalise, and coming up tonight, what a difference here that this week is shaping up to be after weeks of some record heat. It is cooler. Tonight we're down to 62 with some showers. We'll let you know how long the wet weather sticks around and just how soon we could be warming back up.
A federal judge in Washington says President Trump's executive order to cut funding for NPR and PBS violates the First Amendment. KPBS is among the stations that lost revenue from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting as a result of that executive order. Well, today's ruling declares the executive order both unlawful and unenforceable. The decision can be appealed, and it's unclear if or when funding would be restored. The order was issued in May of last year. It claimed NPR and PBS did not present a fair, accurate, or unbiased portrayal of current events. Earlier today, both NPR and PBS released statements praising the judge's ruling. Also this afternoon, a new executive order from the president targets mail-in voting in federal elections. It orders the Department of Homeland Security to compile lists of confirmed U.S. citizens who will be 18 or older, and for the Postal Service to only send ballots to those individuals. The order could face legal challenges. Elections are run by states, not the federal government. Things are going from bad to worse when it comes to the price San Diegans are paying for gas. KPBS reporter John Carroll has the latest numbers and the reaction from drivers.
San Diegans are used to paying higher gas prices than most of the rest of the nation, but now the price point at the pump has become a point of pain.
Well, I think it's horrible.
Robbie Holly has a message for politicians in Washington.
Oil prices, Iran and everything going on right now, it's just a mess. It's just a mess over there. And it's messing us up. It's messing everybody else up, too. So the message is just to clean up all the Iran mess and get oil back and get it down to where it should be, right?
Gas prices have been increasing ever since this conflict started. They continue to spike upward now for a fourth straight week in California, but also throughout the U.S.
When it comes to prices in San Diego County, Anjane Venegas says there's actually a tiny sliver of a silver lining.
For San Diego, drivers are paying $5.95 for a gallon. But there are areas like Los Angeles, they are already paying more than $6 for a gallon.
So $5.95 a gallon is the average for San Diego, but it's not difficult to find $6 a gallon gas here. These signs of our times are getting more and more painful to look at by the day. Whether you're using cash or credit, and no matter what grade, everything here up over $6 a gallon. But the real terrifying sight is found here at the bottom with folks who have to use diesel, $7.69 or $7.79 a gallon. Among the biggest users of diesel are truckers, so as these prices shake out through the economy, we can expect to see prices go up for all sorts of things brought to market by trucks. Even on a smaller scale, for folks whose cars use diesel, it's bad. We watched as this guy filled up his VW Jetta with 13.5 gallons that cost him north of $105.
It's painful. It's painful every time.
Dr. Greg Wygant does a lot of driving for his job.
I do street medicine, so I'm driving around the city a lot, and so I find myself here quite a bit, and it's getting a little pricey.
As long as the conflict rages on the other side of the world, we can expect it to get even pricier here. John Carroll, KPBS News.
And the United States is now a full month into its war on Iran. It's unclear when it will end, and today the Secretary of Defense said his intent is to be unpredictable. Maribel Gonzalez has the latest developments.
Go to the strait and just take it. In an early Tuesday morning Truth Social post, President Donald Trump called on European allies to help open the Strait of Hormuz, a major oil choke point effectively blocked by Iran. Trump criticized the UK and other countries for not getting involved, posting, quote, "Start learning how to fight for yourself." U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth echoed the president's message.
There are countries around the world who ought to be prepared to step up on this critical waterway as well. It's not just the United States Navy. Last time I checked, there was supposed to be a big bad Royal Navy.
Americans are doling out more for less at the pump as the average U.S. gas price rose to $4 a gallon.
The gas price is hitting us.
Hegseth insists a regime change has occurred in Iran, but Democrats are concerned.
The new leader is more conservative, more rigid, and really more of a threat to the region and to the United States. So if this is victory, then we're in big trouble.
Secretary Hegseth also says the U.S. is focused on pursuing a deal to end the war.
And the terms of the deal are known to them. If Iran is not willing, then the United States War Department will continue with even more intensity.
With that, the secretary said he visited U.S. Central Command troops over the weekend. And when it comes to the potential of sending in American troops,
the point is to be unpredictable.
Maribel Gonzalez, KPBS News.
The state auditor has announced it will audit so-called fusion centers in California. KPBS reporter Scott Rod says these centers allow law enforcement agencies to share intelligence and investigation leads. But some state lawmakers worry there's a lack of oversight.
Fusion centers emerged following the terrorist attacks on 9/11 to break down information silos in law enforcement. There are about half a dozen in California, including the San Diego Law Enforcement Coordination Center. Mike German is a former FBI agent and national security expert who has studied fusion centers for decades. He says it can be hard for the public and even lawmakers to understand how they work.
FBI and Department of Homeland Security officials operate within these fusion centers with access to all of their federal systems, sitting side by side with emergency response personnel, public health personnel, law enforcement personnel, and these unknown private sector entities with no clear regulation about how they're supposed to share information they're collecting about the rest of us and what they do with it.
The state audit will examine oversight of these fusion centers. It will also look at whether they're following state sanctuary laws that restrict information sharing when it comes to federal immigration enforcement.
We need to have strong oversight, stronger guidelines about how these centers operate, and more transparency so that people who are being subjected to this kind of surveillance understand what's going on.
In a statement, the San Diego Law Enforcement Coordination Center Director Roy Frank said his organization is transparent and will comply with the audit. Scott Rod, KPBS News.
San Diego County Sheriff Kelly Martinez transferred almost 3 times more jail inmates to ICE custody last year than in 2024. KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says this dramatic increase in ICE transfers has spurred renewed calls to end the practice.
Under California's sanctuary laws, county sheriffs can transfer inmates to ICE custody, as long as they've been convicted of certain crimes or ICE has a federal warrant. In San Diego, the Sheriff's Department transferred 83 people to ICE custody last year, up from only 30 in 2024. And the main reason for the spike is a big increase in warrants from ICE. While many of those transfers had violent criminal convictions like murder, kidnapping, assault, and child abuse, some had non-violent offenses from several years ago, like Cosme Cautalu, a Cuban national who had been in the U.S. for 15 years. Cautalu's aunt shared his story at the forum.
Immigration is getting completely out of control, out of hand, and being pulled over for tinted windows to later being asked for all type of identifications and then being arrested and sent to the middle of nowhere. Just imagine how we feel.
Records show Cautalu was convicted of robbery in 2022 and rearrested for a parole violation in January 2025. A few days later, he was transferred to ICE custody and later deported to Mexico. Immigrant advocates at the forum renewed calls to end all ICE transfers. They point out that transfers are discretionary, and sheriffs in other counties like Los Angeles have stopped the practice. County Supervisor Paloma Aguirre said any type of cooperation with ICE fuels fear and anxiety in immigrant communities.
I don't need to repeat this, but we know we're living in a time where fear is real in our communities. I would even call it terror.
Toward the end of the forum, Aguirre asked Martinez whether she planned to stop the practice. The sheriff said she would not. She says that it's safer for ICE agents to pick up their targets in jail instead of going out into the community and potentially arresting people with no criminal history.
If they're going to go into the community, there will be collateral damage, and that's my bigger concern.
In 2024, county supervisors tried to limit the sheriff's ability to transfer inmates to ICE custody. However, Sheriff Martinez has argued that, as an independently elected official, she has the sole and exclusive authority to operate the county jail system. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
I'm William Brangham. Tonight on the NewsHour, the war with Iran drives the cost of gas to over $4 a gallon for the first time in 4 years. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
We've been covering California's new Farmworkers Day holiday extensively today. Earlier, we heard from activists and farm workers themselves about the changing legacy of Cesar Chavez. For decades, the Imperial Valley city of Brawley has celebrated Chavez as a hometown hero. Now, KPBS reporter Corey Suzuki says the city is confronting his alleged abuses.
As allegations of rape and sexual abuse against American civil rights icon Cesar Chavez emerged 2 weeks ago, Max Reyes didn't hesitate. Reyes is the son of Mexican-American farm workers and the organizer of Brawley's annual Cesar Chavez Day March. The very next day, he removed Chavez's name from the event on Facebook, renaming it the El Movimiento March.
Sadness, like a betrayal, hurt. Those are the feelings I had because we had placed this man on such a pedestal.
The allegations against Chavez, which are continuing to shake California, have been especially painful for Brawley, the farming community where Chavez went to middle school and where his wife was born. A painting of Chavez sits on the east wall of the school he attended, Miguel Hidalgo Elementary, and the city has a central street named after him. City officials say they're looking at options for renaming it. Reyes says the name has to come down. He says the farmworkers' rights movement is not a cult, unwilling to see their leaders' flaws, protecting them at all costs.
We can't just say he didn't exist. I mean, well, but we'll tell the truth.
The Brawley City Council could discuss renaming Cesar Chavez Street as early as next week. Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
3 nonprofits in San Diego were awarded new electric vehicles today. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says funding was provided by SDG&E Citizens Energy Corporation.
It's now my pleasure to welcome Bill Kennedy III to share a few words. Thank you.
Citizens Energy is a nonprofit led by Joseph Kennedy III. Their EV grant program this year is giving vehicles to the Chicano Federation, Healthy Day Partners, and Serving Seniors. Melinda Forsty is president and CEO of Serving Seniors, which provides food and wellness programs to older adults living in poverty. She says the organization's current fleet of vehicles is aging, and the EVs will save money on gas and maintenance.
You know, every year we do hundreds of thousands of miles annually. So in a typical day, one vehicle may drive up to 200 miles at a time sometimes. We serve meals from Oceanside to Imperial Beach to La Mesa. So the amount of energy we're going to be able to save with these vehicles is really remarkable.
Those energy savings will be reinvested in Serving Seniors programming, which includes health education workshops, art classes, and social activities. The EV grant program from SDG&E and Citizens Energy aims to provide $14 million to organizations supporting low-income and marginalized communities. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
We'll break it down by the weather headlines because a much different pattern than this time last week. It is windy and it is cooler, and that continues through the middle of the week. Now by Friday, we'll be drier, but the winds will still be gusty, and we're going to start to welcome a big warm up again as we head into the weekend. Now, when we have this kind of setup, not a huge difference between overnight temperatures and afternoon highs in many locations, with Oceanside, San Diego, Chula Vista, somewhere around the upper 50s and lower 60s. It will be much chillier, though. Mount Laguna down to 59 and should squeeze out a dry night in Borrego Springs down to 56. And then as we go into the day tomorrow, we'll be seeing more clouds than the precipitation. That really has been impacting us here through tonight. So a little bit drier at times as we take a look here at the rain that has moved on through and what's ahead as we head into the day on Wednesday. We'll deal with some of those clouds lingering for most of the day, clearing out by night, and then another cloudy start to the day on Thursday with some areas of showers still lingering before we see a shift in the wind and some drier air returns, but still some gusty winds. The weekend, that's when we're going to start to welcome temperatures warming right back up. Not as hot as we've been previously, but certainly you'll see an increase in those temperatures. Look at that, really steady increase along the coast from low 70s to mid 70s to upper 70s to 80 degrees. We'll follow a similar trend here here after a brief dip in temperatures Thursday inland. We'll be back to the mid-80s for a pretty toasty weekend. Mountain forecast will keep things cool for the next 4 days, even the start of the weekend, but then Sunday's turning quite pleasant with temperatures into the lower 70s. What's the forecast looking like across the desert? Gosh, we stay pretty cool with temperatures into the upper 70s. That should make it nice for some outdoor plans, and then things warm back up Friday and Saturday before we're back to the 90s on Sunday. For KPBS News, I'm Ariella Scalise.
The organization that rates America's movies is taking issue with a child safety feature on social media. Instagram says it will scale back the use of its PG-13 rating for content on teen accounts. The Motion Picture Association owns the copyright for PG-13. The rating is given to movies that feature a certain level of adult language or violence. The Motion Picture Association threatened to sue Instagram over using the phrase, but both sides reached an agreement. And that includes Instagram using a disclaimer that the label isn't the same as a movie rating. KPBS has a special series all about social media, how it's used by young people and how parents can set boundaries. It's called Screen Time, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts at kpbs.org. Here's a look of what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. NPR's Morning Edition will have a preview of the birthright citizenship case at the U.S. Supreme Court. It's scheduled to be heard on Wednesday. And from gas prices to rent, KPBS Midday Edition will have a discussion about the cost of living in San Diego, and that airs at noon on KPBS FM. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.